Okay, so let's begin with the prayer that the schut of our learning should be for the speedy release of the hostages and the protection of our soldiers and Am Yisrael and all of the innocents, and a speedy end to the war. We're going to pick up from where not exactly where we left off last time. I read ahead. So we're going to go back to the part where I started to read ahead and we didn't examine too closely, but we'll try to get through it now this time. So, okay, last week we focused on this part of the Gemara that talks about the Mishnah. It says Hashotem Lo Lugmav, and then we have the statement from Shmuel that it's not Melo Lugmav Mamash, but it's really the amount that you can push to one cheek. And then we asked the kasha on that from this Braita, where Beit Hillel says Melo Lugmav. And so we said, you see, that's not like Shmuel. Shmuel says Kimlo Lugmav. And Beit Hillel says Melo Lugmav. So then the Gemara said, it's not any better than what he said about the Mishnah. The Mishnah said Melo Lugmav. And Shmuel says it means Kimlo Lugmav. So it could be the same thing here. But we couldn't say that. Why? Does anybody remember why we couldn't say that? Now that I'm rushing through this.
There'd be no point citing another opinion if that says the same thing.
No.
No. When it brings another, okay, never mind.
Wait, do you remember what it was, or you're just guessing?
I thought I remember, but I guess that I didn't.
Okay. No, okay. It was coming from a place of sincerely trying to remember. That's fine. But this is what we said. What we said was Shmuel says you have to read the Mishnah as if it says Kimlo Lugmav. It'll look like. So then we said, but here Beit Hillel says Melo Lugmav. And that's not like what Shmuel says. And Shmuel says Kimlo Lugmav. So then the Gemara said, "Miyadifa mimatnitin." It's no, it's not. How is this any better than our Mishnah? We also said that it said Melo Lugmav, and we said it's Kidei Shireh. It's supposed to look like it's Melo Lugmav. In other words, Kimlo Lugmav. So why did the Gemara though reject that answer? So the Gemara rejected the answer because, and maybe this is what you were trying to remember, Michael, because there's another opinion in this Braita of Rabbi Eliezer who says explicitly Kim Lo Lugmav. So why is that? So why is that a problem?
It's superfluous.
Michael Schwartz, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's superfluous.
Because
you could interpret what Beit Hillel says as being Kimlo Lugmav.
Right. So if we say that what Beit Hillel really means when he says Melo Lugmav, what he really means is Kimlo Lugmav, so then Rabbi Eliezer and Beit Hillel are saying exactly the same thing. And we don't have such a thing in a Braita or a Mishnah. We have two Deot that express the same thing. They would just say that, it could have said Beit Hillel ve Rabbi Eliezer Omri. So the Gemara answered. What was the Gemara's answer?
That Beit Hillel means, I believe, one cheek that's pressed against. So something having to do with pressure, but anyway, it's a
Okay, this is why we review. So, Ika beinayum lo dugma b'dachuk. So you remember the basic idea, but you didn't assign it to the right person. Ika beinayum lo dugma b'dachuk. The difference between them is a cheekful that's pressed in. So now from the Gemara itself, it's not clear which one is which, but we're going after what Rashi says. And I'll explain why Rashi says what he does. So Rashi says it means that ultimately I still need to have both Deot of Beit Hillel and Rabbi Eliezer because they're not precisely the same. Beit Hillel says Melo Lugmav, and yes, it means one cheekful pushed to the side, but it means it's completely pushed out. And Rabbi Eliezer is Kimlo Lugmav, and it means one cheekful that's not completely pressed out. In other words, just enough to fill the cheek without pushing it and trying to fill it up all the way. So how does Rashi know that Beit Hillel is the one who says that it's pushed out all the way, and Rabbi Eliezer is the one who says it could just be the cheekful without being pushed out? How does he know which one is which? Because from the Gemara it just says Ika beinayhu, the difference between them, or literally mashiesh beinehem, what is between them, is melo lugmav dachuk. So it implies that one says dachuk, one says it's pressed, and the other one doesn't say it's pressed. So how does he know which one is which?
I mean, Hillel would generally be the more lenient position. And in this case, a larger volume is a more lenient position.
Actually, that's a reasonably good answer. That's not the one I was thinking of, but I'll accept it. No, it's a reasonable thing to say. Absolutely reasonable to say. What I was going to say, it's not, it's along similar lines, which is in the structure of the sugya. When Shmuel interprets our Mishnah that says Milo Lugmav, he says Lo Milo Lugmav Mamash El Kol She'ilu Yisrael Kenu Tzad Echad Yir'ekim Lo Lugmav. So that I understand. In other words, the way he phrases that, it sounds like that's the full cheekful that's pushed out. So if that's the way that Shmuel paskins, then that should be the same shita as Beit Hillel. In other words, what I see from this Braita is it tells me who says this shita of Milo Lugmav. In the Mishnah doesn't tell me. The Mishnah is stam. It just says Hashotem Milo Lugmav, and it doesn't assign it to any particular source. So the Braita tells me actually there's a machloket about how much you have to drink. One of the opinions is Beit Hillel. We're going to paskin like Beit Hillel, and he says Melo Lugmav, and I'll understand from Shmuel what Melo Lugmav is. It's when you push it far out to one side. What am I going to do with Rabbi Eliezer? So he says Kim Lo Lugmav. So the kick here, which ostensibly that's how Shmuel wants us to read the Mishnah and Beit Hillel. But somebody who says explicitly Kim Lo Lugmav is already tipping their hat. They're already hinting to me that they're going to be limiting. It's not going to be exactly like a cheekful. He says it mifurash. Beit Hillel doesn't say, just says Melo Lugmav, and he's depending on the idea that everybody knows it means you push it to one side. But Rabbi Eliezer says Kim Lo Lugmav, so it means it's going to be not that full cheekful. It's going to be something like it. This is how I would say it. But I would also say what Michael Werner said. I think that's also true. Very good. Okay, so this brings us up to here. Matkif Rav Oshia. Im Kain Havale mikule beit Shammai mechumrei beit Hillel. So if this is true, if what is true?
If-
Oh,
No, go ahead.
okay, that Beit Hillel is Kamalo Lugmav, Kamalei Lugmav.
Not exactly.
Oh,
Not exactly. So this is here in terms of following the sugya. So again, what did we say? Misha says, "Hashotem lo lugma." Then I have the qualification of Shmuel that it's not malo lugma mamash. It's really kim lo lugma. It's koshi ili soket tzadafat, etc. And it looks like malo lugma. Then I had this question here from the Braita. How can I say that? And I answered it that there are two types of Milolugmav or Kamolugmav. One is the Shita of Beit Hillel, the other is the Shita of Rabbi Yezer. But what was the point of this whole thing here? So when I have Shmuel, if it really comes back to Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, it comes back to our first Ma'amar, where Shmuel is explaining the Mishnah. He explains the Mishnah and he says it means Kamlo Lugmav. Then that's challenged from the Braita, and then I give an answer. The answer is challenged, and then I give an answer to that challenge. So what am I left with at the end? What's my conclusion at the end?
That Beis Hillel.
No,
No, then I'm lost.
it's not. It's not that what you're going to say is wrong. It's not going to be wrong per se. But what was the initial assertion, and what's my conclusion? The initial assertion was Shmuel. He says Mlo Lugmav means Kimlo Lugmav. What's my conclusion?
that's correct.
That it's correct. That's it. In other words, I went through all of this to show that Shmuel is correct. He gives his interpretation of the Mishnah. I challenge it. We push back, challenge it again, and we answer the final challenge. So what does it mean? It means that Shmuel was not disproven. And so now I know that I'm going to learn the Mishnah the way Shmuel says I should learn the Mishnah. That Hashoteh Melo Lugmav means that you Kadesh Yireh, that Kimlo Lugmav, you push it all to one side. That's what I'm left with. So now Matkif Lav Rav Hoshia, Im came, if that's so, if what is so.
If Shmuel is correct.
If Shmuel is correct, and if the halacha is going to be that the Mishnah is saying that Hashoteh Melo Lugmav really means Kim Lo Lugmav, and it means enough to push to one side, then what's my problem? Havale mikule beit Shammai umechumrei beit Hillel. Why is it a kula of beit Shammai and a chumrah of beit Hillel if I say that?
Because generally,
Not generally. I'm not talking about what's generally. Why is it a kula of beit Shammai, and why is it a chumrah of beit Hillel?
because the measurement of Beit Shammai is larger than the measurement of Beit Hillel. Therefore, one can drink more, according to Beit Shammai.
What one would have to drink more before they would be chayav. Right. Right. Very good. That's the answer to the question. Now, the second question, which is, I think, the one you were starting to answer, is why do I care if this is mikule beit Shammai, umi beit and umrei beit Hillel? Why is that a problem?
Because this kula, this is not listed among the 18
Not 18,
kula.
you're confusing with something else, but it's not listed.
It's not listed among the, I forget, and it was this, it was in Edeot lists
Yeah,
the lists the kulas of Beit Shammai that are accepted.
no, actually not. Well, some of them are. They list the kulot of Beit Shammai and the chumrot of Beit Hillel, and this isn't in the list. So it implies to me that what? Why is that? So now, what's the kasha? Why is this altogether problematic? What was I trying to prove or uphold that is now being challenged?
So we're trying to uphold the correctness of the position of Rabbi Shmuel based on an opinion of Rabbi Hillel. And if the position of Rabbi Hillel is problematic, or if we're misreading it, then there's a problem for our reading of Rabbi Shmuel.
Right. By the way, we call him Stam Shmuel. Presume, right? There are reasons for that. So we call him Shmuel. Okay, so according to Shmuel, according to the way Shmuel understood the Mishnah, so one of the things we understood along the way is this is how he will understand Beit Hillel, because apparently Beit Hillel was the author of our Mishnah, and it's presented in our Mishnah as Stam, without attribution, but I learned that it is attributed to Beit Hillel. So if Shmuel is correct that Melo Lugmav means Kimlo Lugmav, then I'll say what Michael Werner said. Then I'll say that it'll come out that Beit Hillel is more machmir than Beit Shammai, because Beit Shammai said, how much do you drink before you're chayav? What I highlighted on the screen.
Reveat.
A revi'it. And as Michael Werner pointed out, so revi'it is a greater measure than one cheekful. So it'll come out that Beit Shammai is mekil, because you have to drink more before you're chayav. So that's Rav Oshia's kasha. Im kain, if it's true that Shmuel is correct in understanding the Mishnah and thereby understanding Beit Hillel, that Melo Lugmav really means one cheekful, one full cheekful, then it will come out that this is a kula of Beit Shammai and a chumra of Beit Hillel, but it's not listed as one of as such. So there must be something wrong with Shmuel's contention. So Amar Le, so he answered him, Ki atshil ba'og melech habashan atshil. Dahavele Beit Shammai lechumra. So Ki atshil, Rashi explained, when it was asked in the Beit Midrash, which what was asked, the Braita was a question. Kama yishteh v'yehei chayav. So that was a question that was asked in the Beit Midrash at the time that this Braita was being learned. So he says, how much does he drink in order to be chayav? So the answer to Rav Oshia, presumably this is Rav Yehuda answering. Rav Yehuda was the one who brought the Ma'amar of Shmuel. Shmuel and Rav Oshia were contemporaries. But it would sound to me, since Rav Yehuda is the one who said it, it seems to me that Rav Yehuda is answering Rav Oshia. See, he's answering and he's saying, Ki atshil. So when this question was posed in the Beit Midrash, they were asking it about Og Melech HaRasha. They're asking it about a giant. Rashi says, Ki atshil bebei midrasha, hach deleo kam yishteri hechayav. When they were asking this question that we had in the Breita earlier, kam yishteri hechayav, the inyan Og Melech HaBashan. They're asking it about Og Melech HaBashan. Klomar, meaning not specifically Og Melech HaBashan, A, because he was dead, and B, he was not Jewish, so he wouldn't have to worry about it. But they're asking Linyan Adam Ka'anakim Yichil. They're asking about especially large people, giant people. Vahavule, I'm sorry, Vahavulu Beit Shammai L'chumra D'Mechayvi B'Revi'it. And if when they asked the question and then they got the answer, the Beit Shammai says Revi'it, Beit Hillel says Malo Lugmav. So in that case, Beit Shammai will be L'chumra. And if he's L'chumra, then I understand why it wasn't in this list of the Kulot of Beit Shammai and the Chumrot of Beit Hillel. Or to put it a little bit differently, it means that this won't be listed Mikulei Beit Shammai because it will not always be a Kula. Sometimes it'll be a Chumra vis-a-vis Beit Hillel, and sometimes it'll be a Kula vis-a-vis Beit Hillel. And the list in Eduyot are things where it's only a Kula, the Gabe Beit Hillel. Okay, that's basically what we got up to last time. And now we're going to look a little bit closer at the part that we read ahead. Matkifla Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera now asks a kasha. Ma'ishna achila dekol chad v'chad b'kichotevet, u'ma'ishna shtiya dekol chad v'chad b'didei. What's the difference between eating, where each and every one is with a kikotevet, whereas with drinking, each and every one is according to that individual?
It would
What's
make
he
sense.
asking?
It makes sense that Rabbi Zera is asking this because he's a particularly small person.
Yeah, but the question that he's asking doesn't have to do with his individual size.
No, it doesn't. But it's yes. Okay.
What's his question?
Why do we
What
have
is-
why do we have an objective measure? I mean, why do we why
Finish that sentence.
his question is why is one chayav after eating a kotevet an objective measure for eating and malay and kamalay ugmav for shtia,
Which is,
I'm sorry.
if a kokotevet is
Subjective measure.
Right? So you said it's objective. So what's shtia? It's a
Subjective measure.
not an objective.
Not an
Subjective,
objective.
or it's a relative.
Relative,
Right.
yes.
It's a relative measure. It could be it's objective, but it's relative. Whereas
Okay,
kotevet is,
so the better distinction would be absolute versus relative.
yeah. So that's his question. Why should there be so who is Rebbe Zera attacking? Matkifla Rebbe Zera. Who is he challenging?
Rabbi Shmuel. Or
Why-
not Rabbi Shmuel.
why
Shmuel. Because Shmuel is the one who says Kamo Lukmav.
Yeah, but what did the Mishnah say?
It said Lukmav, right?
So who is Rebbe Zera challenging?
Sounds like he's challenging the Mishnah, but would he be doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, he's right. Matkifla literally
He's
means an
a
attack,
Tana, okay.
but he's not a Tana. Rabbi
No,
Zera. Rabbi Zera is an Amora.
I'm all
I
right.
thought
Okay,
you
never
knew
mind.
who he was. You know that he's small.
Okay, okay, he's no more. Okay, never mind. I'm getting everything mixed up, but I remembered. Never mind.
Okay. So no. When Matkifa Rabbi Zera, he's attacking, as it were, the Mishnah. But it doesn't mean he's saying that the Mishnah is wrong, but he's saying, why should the Mishnah say why should the Mishnah come up with such a thing? What's the basis for differentiating Shtiya and Achila in this way, where Achila is going to be an absolute measure, and Shtiya is going to be a relative measure. So Amare Abaye. So Abaye answers it. Kim lehu l'Rabanan b'kikotevet d'bahach miyat v'da'ate. It was established to the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan knew that a kikotevet is enough to put one's mind at ease. But sir mehachi lo miyatva. Less than that, it will not put one's mind at ease. So what are we talking about when we're putting somebody's mind at ease? What does that mean?
Given that the chiyuv, I mean that the measure of one is chayav when one reaches for one is chayav for eating or drinking at the point at which one's mind is put at ease.
Right. In other words, that's the shiur that Chachamim were concerned about. Why is that the measure for Yom Kippur, that you eat or drink enough to put your mind at ease? Why is that the measure, as opposed to all other measures of Achila in the Torah are absolute measures? What's different about Yom Kippur?
I mean, we are commanded to afflict ourselves, and so there and one experiences affliction to the extent that one's mind is not at ease.
Good, very good. So the idea is that everywhere else where the Torah says to eat something or to not eat something, then what the Torah is concerned with is eating per se. In other words, all of those things like eating matzah on Leil HaSeder, there's a specific mitzvah to eat. And let's say not eating behemat tameah, it says lo tochlu, you're not allowed to eat. So the Torah defines those mitzvot as in terms of eating. But the Torah never talks about eating regarding fasting on Yom Kippur. It never mentions achila. What does it say? It says, like Michael Werner says, it says lo tu'uneh. Kol hanefesh asher lo tu'uneh. Anyone who does not afflict themselves. So if you eat or drink enough where you no longer feel afflicted, then you're over on not being mu'uneh on Yom Kippur. So that's the conceptual difference, which is hinted at by the way the Torah presents Inui Nefesh on Yom Kippur. Very good. So now to continue what Abai answers to Rabbi Zera, so he says, by Kikotevet, Chachamim knew that if you eat a Kikotevet, that's miyashev da'at. But less than that, it's not. But b'shtiyah, regarding drinking, b'didei miyat v'date, b'shalo miyashev da'ato. His mind will be put at rest or put at ease with the amount that fills his cheek individually. However much his friend's cheek fills doesn't put him at ease, or doesn't necessarily put him at ease. So that's his answer to Rabbi Zeir. That's why the Mishnah differentiates, because from the Torah we have this idea that we want to be me'anen nefesh. Inui nefesh, the Chachamim understand the opposite, as it were, of inui nefesh is going to be yishuv dat. And this is the way you get yishuv dat. It's kekotevet, you get it with eating. And if it's drinking, it's kimlo lugma. Mat kifla Rabbi Zeir. So Rabbi Zeir once again attacks. V'chol ha'olam kulo b'kechotevet. V'og melech habashan b'kechotevet. The whole world is with the kotevet. And also Og melech habashan is with kechotevet. What's his question? What are the words that are missing in his question?
I mean, is Og is Og's is this giant Og's mind put at ease with a Kotevet? I mean, is this Kotevet the Kotevet a Kotevet relative to Og's size is much less than a Kotevet relative to an ordinary person's size?
Good. So kol ha'olam. So Rabbi Zeir is saying, according to you, according to what you're saying now, in other words, what Abaye's basic answer to Rabbi Zeir's first question is, the reason we differentiate between eating and drinking is because we're only concerned about Yishuv Hadat, and it happens that for one, an absolute measure is fine, and the other is the relative measure is what's appropriate. So he says, okay, so what you're telling me, Abaye, is the whole world is going to have Yishuv Hadat from the Kikotevet, and Og Melech Bashan is going to have Yishuv Hadat Mikikotevet. So as you just said, so relative to Og Melech Bashan, Kikotevet is a much smaller amount. It's much smaller in size. So what is Rabbi Zeir getting at? Why is he asking this question to Abaye based on Abaye's answer to him?
Abaye is suggesting that these two different shirim are basically a measure of when Yishuv Dat kicks in, applies. And he's suggesting that for Og Melech Basham, that may not be the case. Or somebody like Og.
And therefore what?
Therefore, this measure.
What was Abaye's distinction between a Kikotevet and Kimlo Ludmav? What was his distinction about the nature of each measure?
For food, one's mind is put at ease with this absolute measure, and for shtia, with the relative measure.
And so now, what is Rabbi Zeir saying to Abaye?
This absolute measure doesn't really. He's questioning whether this, in fact, Og Melech Bashan, or a giant's mind would be put at ease with the Merikotevet, which relative to the size.
Therefore what? And so therefore what?
So therefore this distinction may not hold water, so to speak.
Okay, so I want to pull this out a little bit more. In other words, Abaye's contention is the Kikotevet is an absolute measure because it gives Yishuv Hadat, and Shtiya Kumla is a relative measure because that's what gives Yishuv Hadat. So Rabbi Zeir says, are you telling me that a Kikotevet is going to give the same Yishuv Hadat to Og Melech Bashan as it will to any other person? Or to put it differently, does it make sense to say that eating should not also be a relative measure? In other words, if I'm concerned about this, if I want to make this distinction, why should I make this distinction? If shtiya is a relative measure, I should argue that eating should also be a relative measure, because surely a kekotevet to a giant is not going to give Yeshuva Dat the same way as it's going to be a normal sized person. So it's an attack on this very idea that there should be a distinction between the measure that we use for achila as an absolute measure and shtiya as a relative measure. That's the attack. So Abaye answers it. Male Abaye, kim lehu l'Rabbanan debahacha miyat v'date. So the first thing he says is, I'm not changing my mind about what I said before. The Rabbanan knew that with this he gets Yeshuva Dat, and then less than this he doesn't get Yeshuva Dat. But Mihu, nonetheless, Kule Alma Tuva. Ogmel Habashan Purta. For the whole world, a lot. And for Ogmel Habashan, a little. What does he mean, a lot and a little?
The absolute measure for the world at large is a lot, and the absolute measure for Og Melech Bashan is a little.
Is a little. In other words, he'll get, even Og Melech Habashan will get a little bit of Yeshuv Hadat if he eats a kikotevet. And so he's acknowledging to Rebbe Zera something that that we know bechush, we know this from our life experience, that a small person, let's say a child, is going to get filled up faster.
Or Rabbi Zera.
Or right? So the idea is that we know that in terms of absolute amounts of food consumption, people who are smaller tend to be sated more quickly or with less food than people who are larger. So Bai says, be that as it may, that's true. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that this is the way the Rabbanan knew. And what they'll tell you is, yes, but there are different levels of Yeshuv Hadat. So again, Matkifla Rebbe Zera. Rebbe Zera attacks again. He says, Basar Shamein b'kikotevet, v'lulavek fanim b'kikotevet. Fatty meat is measured with a kikotevet, and grape leaves or grape shoots are also measured with a kikotevet. So what's his question?
I mean, would this absolute measure apply? Would the absolute measure apply, for regardless of the food? I mean,
right. Yeah, basically, yes. In other words, he's saying, are you telling me you're still insisting that this is an absolute measure? Because of course that's what the Mishnah says, but you want to tell me that Chazal understood that you get the same kind of Yeshuv Hadat from eating a piece of fatty meat and the same amount of grape leaves? So Malei Abaye, Kim lehu v'Rabbanan debahacha miyat v'date, Batze mehacha lo miyat v'date. Again, he's holding fast. Says this is what the Rabbanan knew, that this much gives you Yeshuv Hadat. In other words, it's still going to be an absolute measure, regardless of the food. It could be greens, or it could be fatty meat, or it could be a piece of pizza, or it could be ice cream, or bamba, I don't know, mashalo yeh. But if you eat the amount of a kikotevet, you get Yeshuv Hadat. Mihu, nonetheless, basar shamein tuva. Lulavek fanim porta. So what is he saying there?
that fatty meat will give great will give great Yeshuv Hadat, and grape shoots or whatever they are will give a little bit of Yishuv Hadat, but a little bit is still Yishuv Hadat.
So Basar Sheni will give you more, and Levek Vanya will give you a little. Will give you a lot as opposed to a little. So say them. So it teaches you, in any event, something about this idea of Yishuv Hadat. I think there's more to be said about it, but we're going to move on to the next phase. So this part, I don't think, maybe we read this last week, but we certainly didn't explain it. Mat kifla Rava. So now Rava asks the kasha. Kizayit b'chtei achilat pras v'kotevet b'chtei achilat pras. A kazayit is measured by a kedei achilat pras, and also a kotevet is measured by a kedei achilat pras. So, first of all, what's the measure of kedei achilat pras? What do you measure with kedei achilat pras?
The amount of time it takes to eat the quantity of food.
Right. It's a time measure. So it's a time measure. So Rav is saying kazayit is measured ichdei achilat pras, and also kikotevet is measured ichdei achilat pras. So when is a kazayit? When do we measure kazayit ichdei achilat pras? Did I phrase that? Do you understand my question? When is kedei achilat pras relevant by the measure of kazayit?
If I recall, it would be the amount of time that is required to eat a kazait.
For what purpose? For what reason?
For the purpose
You,
of
you said it's kind of a tautology.
it
I
is,
said
yes.
when is
Right, it is. Yeah, yes, okay. So it would be
why do I need to measure? What am I measuring? I'm measuring time, reading from what
so basically the shiur would be like for what time
why
is
do I need to know about eating? What we just mentioned this earlier. What's the significance?
how much can you eat per unit time? And so the
For what purpose?
for establishing the
Is
chiyuv.
this a pie eating contest? Why do I need to know how much time it takes to eat a kazayit?
So
what
as I said,
purpose do I need to know that?
so for the purpose actually is for the purpose of the chiyuv of achila,
Finish that thought.
for the purpose of chiyuv and achila on Yom Kippur.
Well, when is kazayit a relevant? Kazayit is not a relevant measure for Yom Kippur. When is kazayit a relevant measure?
Oh, for I believe for Pesach, nachon?
Michael Schwartz.
I was going to say Pesach or other Isurim.
Okay, so as we said before, all of the other achilot, virtually all other achilot, we had this earlier in the sugya, that virtually all other achilot of Isur are measured with kazayit, and also of mitzvah. For example, eating matzah on Pesach, but also you'll be over on eating a kazayit of chametz on Pesach. Right? You're over on eating a kazayit of chelev anytime. You're over on eating a kazayit of basar b'chalav. Whatever it is that's an isur, we measure the kazayit. So, kazayit b'chtei achilat pras, what does that mean? That in order for you to be chayav, you have to eat that kazayit within this span of time, which is kedei achilat pras. Right? Okay. So, matkif la Rava, kazayit b'chtei achilat pras, v'kotevet b'chdei achilat pras bitmiya. In other words, you're telling me. So I'm going to phrase the question, but you're going to tell me what it means. I'm chayav for eating a kazayit of Yisur b'chdei achilat pras. At the same time, you're telling me that I'm over for eating a kotevet b'chdei achilat pras. When am I chayav for eating a kotevet?
It's Yom Kippur.
On Yom Kippur. So, kazayit b'chdei achilat pras, v'kotevet b'chdei achilat pras. What's the problem here?
They're two different
First of all,
shirim.
which is the larger measure, kazayit or kikotevet?
Kikotevet.
Decide.
The kikotevet.
Right. Okay, right.
How do I know?
We went through this a while ago.
Because
I
we
don't
learned it
remember
in
all the
Shir. We had a whole question about whether it's a little bit more than a kibetza or a little bit less than a kibetza. But what I know from that is that it's obviously larger than a kazayit. Also, if you have an olive in your hand and a date in your hand, you would also know. Okay, so by the way, the girs in the Gemara is kotevet. It should really be kikotevet, but it's saying so. If I become chayav for eating a kazayit, toch kedei achilat pras, how can it be that I'm going to be chayav for eating a kotevet in the same amount of time? Why should it not be the same amount of time?
Because it would take more time to eat a kotevet. No.
So exactly. So if I understand that kotevet is larger, and so I would think that the Torah is going to be mechayevoti for whatever, like what would be a longer time that would be associated with eating more food. So he's challenging. So here he's challenging this idea of using the measure of kedei achilat pras as the time measure for eating on Yom Kippur, that you'll be chayav for eating toch kedei achilat pras. So why should that be the measure? Again, it's his question is getting at a very similar question. They're very similar to the questions of Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera was attacking this idea of having some kind of when relativity is used and when it's not used, and why should it be used here and not used here. And so here, in a similar way, Rava is saying, if I understand that relativity, it has a halachic function or has halachic import, then I should also apply relativity to the time frame for eating on Yom Kippur. I should make it relative to the larger measure. Amar le Abaye, kim lehu Rabbanan debahachem yad v'date. So he answers basically his same answer. He says, this is what the Rabbanan knew. This is how much it takes to get Yishuv Hadat from eating. B'tfei mehachi lo miyat v'date. More than that, he won't get Yishuv Hadat. More than what? What would increase that would not give him Yishuv Hadat?
The amount of time it takes to eat.
The amount of time it takes to eat. So, Kimlahu Rabbanan de Bahachi Miyat Vedate, the Hachi What the Rabbanan knew is that this length of time of Kedei Achilat Pras, that's the time he would need to eat the Kikotevet in order to get Yishuv Hadat. But more than that amount of time, he won't get Yishuv Hadat. If it takes him longer than Kedei Achilat Pras to eat his Kikotevet, he won't get Yishuv Hadat. So once again, what do I see? What's the difference now between eating on Yom Kippur and eating any other Isur throughout the year?
The shiur for Yom Kippur, for both volume and time, is based on when one obtains Yeshuv Hadat, whereas with all the others, it's a different measure.
With all the others, the Torah gives us it's the Torah is concerned with a concept of eating, whatever the Torah considers to be enough food that's consumed that would be considered achila. It's not worried about whether you're going to get Yishuv Hadat or not get Yishuv Hadat. Means that one way of putting it would be to say that eating a kazayit of any given food is enough that somebody considers as if that they ate something. Less than that, it's not really eating. It's not within the gather of achila. But on Yom Kippur, I'm not concerned about the gather of achila. I'm concerned about the gather of Yishuv Hadat. That might be more than the minimum amount that I would normally eat, that I would normally associate with minimal eating. So it's a larger amount of food, but you still consume it in the same amount of time because I need both of those factors to give you Yishuv Hadat. Because I am not, even though we started late, I am pressed for time. I actually prepared the Rashi's here, where Rashi is going to give us a little bit more detail about how we get to the measure of Kedei Achilat Pras, not just that it's mentioned elsewhere, but it gives us a little bit more insight. In order to do that, we're going to have to learn a Mishnah in Eruvin, and we'll do it next time. So next time, we're going to pick up from here, and we're going to learn this Rashi. Anybody who wants to look ahead, you are all encouraged. The Mishnah is a Mishnah in Eruvin, Perek Chet, Mishnah Bet. It's a little bit tricky, and I made a little chart. Like, it's not a chart. I actually wanted to make it into a chart. Just a second. But I can send this to you. These are the measures that you need to know to you see the screen? Wait a second. Yeah. These are the measures that you need to know in order to understand the Mishnah. And if you're doing it with Perush, they'll tell you these, but I don't know if anybody gives them to you as measures. I'll just mention what they are, but I'll send this to you. These are we start off here with volumetric measures. That one sa'ah equals 6 kav. So therefore 4 sa'ah is going to be 24 kabim. 1 kav is 24 beitzim. So therefore a quarter kav is 6 beitzim. These are all going to be relevant in this discussion. The next are monetary I can't think of the word. Different amounts of money. So
monetary units.
Thank you. So the 1 sela equals 4 dinarim equals 24 me'in, ma'a me'in. which equals 48 pundionin. A pundion was the smallest unit. So therefore, 1 me'ah is 2 pundion. What the Mishnah is going to talk about is essentially how much bread you can buy, given that if one selah can buy 4 se'in of flour that will be made into bread. That's the shuk, and all of the calculations are based on that idea. So anybody who wants, when I send out I'll try to remember, I'll send this out to you just as a reference, because it's easier that if whatever Perush you have, they're going to tell you these things. But it just is easier for me to see it like this. And I was trying to think about a way of putting it into a table to make the relationships easier, but at least this will give you some idea. There's a machloket in the Mishnah about this. We have Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka and Rabbi Shimon, and you'll see. So I am going to go into this a little bit because otherwise you want to understand Rashi, and Yagdil Torah v'Yadir. We should learn as much as we can. So that's it for tonight. And thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you next week on time. All of us.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.